I finally finished packing for a week-long fishing trip with two of my best friends. Although I was excited, I also had some reservations. My friends and I have been close since elementary school, almost like brothers, and we always enjoyed our time together. But this trip was different. For years, we did everything together with our wives. When we were younger, we even dated each other's wives until we settled down. Kenny couldn't join us initially because of an important business meeting, so his wife Pam decided to wait for him. Then, a couple of days before we left, Don discovered he had a meeting on Friday and had to leave early, so his wife also stayed home. When my wife Becky found out the other wives wouldn't be coming, she decided to stay home too. It wasn't the fantastic vacation we were used to, and I was upset. Normally we all went together and had a great time. I usually had the best lovemaking of the year just before, during, and after our trips with our friends. Honestly, I was more upset about missing out on great lovemaking than spending time with my buddies, but I was beginning to want the trip to end. Despite that, I had great lovemaking before the trip. Becky and I had lovemaking to the point of exhaustion over the past week. Even when I preferred to sleep, she was insistent. This was our usual pre-trip routine, which I enjoyed for the rest of the year. Our bed life was lacking. We had lovemaking maybe twice a week, but it felt like a distraction. This was a big change from when we first got married. Back then, we had lovemaking anytime we found a flat surface or a quiet place. The decline was gradual, but became noticeable about 5 years ago. That summer, we went from having lovemaking 5 days a week, sometimes twice a day, to maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Often, I wanted to make love, but Becky refused. I was upset at first, but after a few small arguments, I let it go. If she refused long enough, I would handle it myself. On Thursday night, I reached that point again. I was in the office, drinking beer and taking a break from packing. Becky was upstairs putting the kids to bed, then went down to the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came into the living room, sat next to me, took a sip of wine, and looked at me with concern. "Darling," she said, "I need to talk seriously for a minute. I know what I'm about to say might make you angry, but please promise to let me finish before you say anything. I'll answer all your questions, but I need to say this now. I'm scared, but I should have told you months ago. I needed some information first." I felt a pang of fear. Becky looked pitiful, scared, yet determined. I realized this was serious. She took a deep breath, another long sip of wine, and continued. "I know you haven't been happy with our bed life the past few years, honey. I haven't enjoyed it much either. Davy, I love you, but you just don't turn me on carnally anymore. And David, I want to stay married. You're a great father, a wonderful provider, and a friend, but I need more than you can give me in bed." I felt my anger rise. What did she just say? I knew she didn't let me love her much anymore, but what was last week about? I opened my mouth to respond when Becky continued, raising her hand. "David, you promised to let me talk first." I clenched my jaw and sat back as she continued. "David, I met a man I've known for a while who fascinates me. I can't live as we did before. I intend to have lovemaking with him. I didn't want to go behind your back. I still care about you, but you may not get as much as you think. I just don't enjoy being with you carnally, and I need to be with him. He makes me feel alive, like when we first got married. I can't get enough of him." I jumped up and yelled, "You're a cheater! How could you?" Becky stood up and pushed me back into a chair. She stood over me and said, "Shut up. I told you that you wouldn't like what I had to say, but you promised to listen. Now shut up and listen." I sat in shock as she continued. "I consulted with Don about divorce laws. You can't afford to divorce me. You'll have to accept that I'll be with my new man. If you divorce me, I'll get at least 2/3 of your salary for alimony and child support. I'll get the kids and the house. You'll get half the savings in retirement. You'll end up struggling financially, and the kids will suffer from a broken home. For your own good and the kids' sake, you must accept this. I still love and respect you, but I can't continue with our unsatisfactory bed life. Nothing will change for us, honey. I'll still be with you carnally, but you must understand that I will be gone all night sometimes and might take trips with my new lover." I sat there in shock, anger building as I tried to control myself. Becky moved back to her chair. I took a deep breath and said, "You're a cheater. I thought I knew you. I thought you loved me, but now you're breaking my heart. How long have you been cheating? Who is this guy?" Becky looked at me angrily and said, "Insulting me won't help, honey. I hope you can get over your grudge and we can live as we have for the past few years. I'm not telling you how long, when, where, or who I'm with. It's none of your business. If you try to find out, there will be consequences. I had another lover for a while and got tired of hiding it. You need to hear it from me because I can't keep hiding it forever. I'm tired of sneaking around and want to spend the night with him. This way you can watch the kids while I take care of my needs. I won't tell you who it is because I know you'd try to do something about it and get hurt or arrested. The kids need you to work and support us. If you find out and do anything, you will be prosecuted. Measures are in place to ensure this. I was shocked by how calmly Becky presented her plan. It was clear she had been preparing for this moment. She had an answer for everything. I said, well, I better call the guys and tell them I'm not going on this trip. We need to clear some things up. I reached for the phone, but Becky grabbed my hand. She looked me in the eyes and said, no, you will go on this trip. The kids will go to your parents as planned. I'm not staying here alone for the next 2 weeks, and I don't want you trying to figure out who I'm with. You need this vacation to get used to it. If you change your plans, you'll regret it. We have informants everywhere. If you try to find out who my lover is or change our lives, I will find out and you will be punished. Accept my plan and I'll ensure you don't have a miserable life. Things can stay the same if you cooperate. Becky walked to the desk, took an inch-thick envelope from the drawer and handed it to me. Here, this is a report of all your activities over the past month. Read it and you'll see we know everything. If you try to ruin our plans, I will destroy you. Now, I'm going to bed. If you want me tonight, come over. Nothing has to change unless you make waves. I sat in shock. Who was this woman and what happened to my wife? I thought I knew her, but now she seemed like a scheming, cheating stranger. I watched her walk upstairs, hips swaying seductively, but it didn't affect me at all. I finally opened the envelope and began to read. The detailed report was astonishing, noting things I didn't even remember. It must have cost a fortune. Was she connected to a millionaire or the mafia? According to the report, someone was watching me constantly. They recorded everything, from a stain on my shirt to every time I looked at a beautiful woman. It took me over 2 hours to read the report, and I realized they even knew things only I should know. Was there a bug in my clothes or wallet? I sat and thought about how to get rid of my cheating wife without losing everything in the settlement. I needed to talk to my friends, but what if one of them was involved with Becky? Planning with them could backfire. Becky came upstairs and said, well, Dave, are you going to bed or sit there sulking? I'm not waiting all night. She went to our bedroom. I stayed on the sofa in the office. Becky woke me up with her anger as she started making breakfast. Get your sorry rear up, Dave. You need to get organized and ready for work before the kids notice you didn't sleep in your room last night. When you return in 2 weeks, I expect you to behave normally. If you cause a split in the family, I already told you the consequences. I am willing to meet your needs occasionally, but I expect you to play your part. If you find another woman, I will divorce you. I felt myself boil as anger washed over me. I screamed, what the hell? You can bully me and expect me to be okay with it, but I don't have the same right? Not that I was going to do it, but why the hell do you think it's okay for you and not me? Becky grinned and replied, damn it, Dave. We both know what you're getting from me now is enough for your needs. If you go out and find something else, it will only be in retaliation. The reason I should end the marriage is that you cannot fulfill your marital responsibilities satisfactorily. If you could give me what I need, I would never end our marriage, and I expect the same from you. I was so angry that I could barely speak, but finally managed to respond. I just can't believe you. Not once did you come to me and ask for more or a different way to make love. You never once asked me to do anything in the bedroom that we don't usually do. How was I supposed to know you wanted or needed something more if you didn't tell me? I always made sure you had climaxes more often than not. How was I supposed to know something was missing when you acted like everything was fine? Becky just stood there and looked at me and then said, well, if you have to ask this late, you really are in the dark, aren't you? Besides, my dear, what you lack is not so much quantity as quality. You just never learned how to please me, and I eventually decided you never would. So I started looking elsewhere for what I needed. Now go and get dressed. I'm tired of listening to your whining. I stumbled upstairs and went through my usual morning routine. We had a quiet breakfast, and Sean, our son, asked what was going on. I started to answer, but Becky intervened. She said, your father is worried about a little problem he has. I'm sure he'll be back to normal after the holidays. She looked at me intently, then went back to her breakfast. When I got to work, I decided to ignore some of Becky's advice and cancel my trip with the guys. I had to leave straight from work and meet them at Dennis's place, where we would all go together. I had a nice SUV, so we would put all the gear in it and go from there. Roger was driving with me and Don was driving his car because he had to get back into town on Wednesday. I spoke to Roger and told him something had come up and I had to back out. I offered to let him borrow my truck to move the gear. Roger said, "Oh no, Dave, that's not going to happen. I just got off the phone with Becky, and she warned me that you might try to pull this off. She said you've been under a lot of pressure lately and working too much. She already talked to your secretary and confirmed you don't have anything important planned. I promised her I'd make sure you went on this trip. If necessary, I'll come and find you. You will come with us, and you will have fun." I started to protest and outright refuse, but then I felt a pang of fear. What if it was Roger? But Becky said she was going away this weekend and Roger was coming with me. But wait, Kenny stayed home and will arrive midweek. Could it be him or someone else? Damn it, I'm stuck. I really needed to think more and make some plans. I needed to buy a CCTV system. But how? From the report I read, I realized that Becky and her friends were tracking my credit card purchases and phone calls. They even tracked cash withdrawals from the bank. They could discover unusual expenses overnight. I was sitting at my desk, staring into space when Becky called me. As soon as I picked up the phone, she attacked me. "David, I told you that you had to go on your trip and that it was not in your best interest to try to find out who I was dating. Roger just called me and said you tried to back out. This is your last warning. Do not contact me or you will be trash and you will never see your children again. Am I clear?" She slammed the phone down, and I was frozen in shock. Again, Roger turned me in. Damn, did that mean he was involved, or was he a real friend and cared about me? Come to think of it, none of my old friends seemed as close to me as they did a few years ago. It was almost as if they were Becky's friends now, and she was one with them. Could this be? No, not all of them. Well, I decided to go on the trip and met the guys at Denny's. We had dinner, and they were all having fun as usual while I sat and moped. Finally, Don asked me what happened. I looked at him for a moment and said, "Becky has some damn stupid idea in her head, and I don't know how to deal with it. It's hard for me to even believe she's telling the truth. But if she is, my marriage is over." Roger looked at Don and said, "Damn it, Don, you know how Becky is. She called me this morning and said her husband is trying to cancel our little trip and wants to make sure he goes. She said he's been upset and difficult to live with for the past few days, and he really needs this vacation to get his head in order. I promised her that we would make sure he came with us and had a good time." Don said, "Yes, I've noticed myself that he's been a little out of sorts the last few months. He doesn't joke or smoke with us like he used to. I'm sure he needs a little attitude change, and we can certainly give him that. I have beer and his favorite whiskey in the car." He turned to me and continued, "Damn it, buddy. Nothing ever stood between us and our stay in the cabin before. Hell, I know the ladies won't be there this time, but damn, that just means we can drink more and lie more." I followed them out the door, and we went to the stream where we were fishing. It was only a 2-hour drive, so we got there just in time for a good drink before bed. The next morning, both guys insisted on fishing, and we hit the road. I had actually forgotten some things from the last few days, but by the time we got back to the cabin, I was thinking about Becky again. I couldn't believe she meant what she said, but damn. Needless to say, instead of thinking about what I needed to do, I let the guys talk me into having a drink with them after dinner. I was sitting and sipping drinks with them when Don looked at me and asked, "Okay, Dave, you look like you lost your best friend, and I know you haven't because I'm still here. What the hell made you so upset?" I decided, what the hell? If I don't talk to someone I trust, I'll go crazy. I knew I could trust these guys. Heck, we've been best buds since we started school. I told Don and Roger about the last few months, about the last 3 years of my marriage and my fading bed life, and then told them about Becky's stunning revelation on Thursday night. After I finished, Don looked at me and said, "Damn it, Dave. Are you sure that's what Becky said? Damn it, I can't believe she would say or even think something like that. We have known her for many years, and she is the kindest and most loving woman I can imagine." "Yes, me too. But that's exactly what she said as far as I remember. Is what she said really true?" Don leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, Dave, I can't say what the divorce will be like if that's what you're asking, but she's got a point. If she actually does what she says she wants to do, you really need to decide how you're going to handle it. If she's acting distant, you need to consider if breaking up the family and causing emotional damage to the children is worth it. The courts usually side with the mother in custody cases. Unless she's proven unfit, you'll lose the kids. She's right that you'll have to support the kids until they're adults, and you'll also be expected to help with college. Since she doesn't work, you'd have to pay alimony until she remarries. You'll either lose the house to her or have to sell it and give her half the money. You'll have to give her at least half your savings and retirement account. So, yeah, she's mostly right. There's a formula for calculating child support, and it usually doesn't benefit the supporting parent. The court aims to give the children exceptional support, so you'll likely lose at least 3/4 of your earnings to child support. You'd also have to provide medical care for the kids. Dave sat there in shock, hearing his friend, who was a lawyer, say that was much worse than hearing Becky tell him he would go broke if he didn't accept her sleeping around. I need to know. She won't tell me who she's with, and I need to know. When I find out, I'll make sure she is no longer with him. Dave, as your friend, I understand what you're saying, but as a representative of the court, I must tell you not to do this. I hate to tell you this, but it is my duty to report such things. If I hear that one of Becky's lovers has been hurt, I'll have to report you. My advice is to just accept it and carry on with your life. Maybe if she cheats on you, she'll change her mind. Either way, you'd be better off just accepting it and maintaining the status quo. Don, I can't believe you're saying that. How would you feel if Shelley did something like that and threatened you? Are you saying you would just accept her betraying you like Becky is going to do to me? Don looked confused and replied, No, I'd probably be as upset as you are. But I know Shelley wouldn't do anything like that. She is head over heels in love with me and knows that I am the best lover she could ever find. I make a great living, and she wouldn't consider losing access to money or hurting our children or me. Buddy, you better just accept your fate. If she has someone watching you as closely as you say, based on the report she gave you, you're screwed if you try to find out who she's with. She'll find out and do something about it. From what you told me, she's got you so angry that she might even find out about this conversation. She knew where we were going, didn't she? Crap. I didn't even think about it. Damn. Now I have something to think about. Dave was puzzled by the smile Roger had throughout the discussion and the strangely happy look on Don's face. He couldn't believe his friends were so unfazed by the way Becky had betrayed him. Finally, he said, Well, to hell with her. Let's have a little more drink. The next morning, Dave got up before his two friends. He decided he wanted to be alone, so he took his fishing gear and walked upstream to his favorite fishing spot. He was just about to start fishing when his cell phone rang. He always carried it with him, but there were many places here where it did not work due to poor signal. He was surprised to get a signal here. He saw it was Becky and decided not to answer. As soon as Becky left the message, he listened to it. He was startled to hear her say, Well, honey, my sources tell me that you got some really good advice from Don last night. I hope you're going to use it. I love you, and you are too good a provider and father to lose. But if you do something crazy, I can let you go and still take good care of the kids. Now have some fun. Dave looked at the phone in shock. He knew there was no cell service in the cabin and no landline. So how did she know about the conversation between him and the guys? Oh, damn. There must have been a bug in his equipment, and someone intercepted it during the transmission. He had to see if he could find it later. Dave never noticed Roger and Don standing at the edge of the forest while he listened to the message. They grinned and gave each other a thumbs up before disappearing back into the woods, heading toward the cabin. Roger looked at Don and said, Well, do you think this will solve the problem, or should we keep the pressure up for a while longer? I think we need to keep detailed reports for a month or two, and we all need to keep telling him to just accept it. Things are going well for us right now, and if we can convince him to let her keep having lovemaking and spend a few full evenings and weekends with us, we'll be miles ahead. Can you imagine how much more enjoyable it would be to sleep with her without the time restrictions we have now? We got her so excited about lovemaking that now she's ready to do whatever we tell her to get more. If we do everything right, he can tell our wives about the problem, and we can tell them that we are helping him figure out what the outcome is. At night, this will be an excellent cover. Dave fished until almost noon, but his heart wasn't in it. He spent most of the time thinking about his marriage and trying to figure out who Becky was having an affair with. He also wanted to find a way to end it and take revenge. However, he knew he couldn't do this until he found out who, when, where, and even why, if possible. On Friday evening, after Becky was told her 3 friends were almost at the cabin, she turned to the man with her. She had been passionate all day and was ready for what was to come. She said, "Oh God, I've needed this for so long. I can't wait for the others to arrive. Shouldn't Dawn be here early on Wednesday?" "Yeah, baby. Then you'll have both of us for 2 whole nights before I have to go help babysit your loving hubby." "Oh God, I'll be so glad when all 3 of us can get together at the same time. I just hate being with only 1 or 2 of you at a time. After what you did to me, Dave will never be able to satisfy me again. Do you think we've taken care of everything? I love him to end of life, and he's a great provider and father. I don't want to lose him." "Yes." I think we can control it. Yeah, I just hope Dave doesn't start talking to our wives and causing problems. Everything has been good for us for the last 3 years. I really think we should have been happy with the way things were instead of being greedy. The thought of you being with us all night or during a long trip is nice, but I'm not sure we can put that much pressure on old Davy. We may have awakened a monster. Well, the mistakes we've identified and the things we've found that make him look bad should make him back off. I just wish he wasn't so damn straightforward and noble. I can't believe we couldn't find anything in his actions that was insidious. How can a man be in business for himself and not take advantage of the situation to earn a little extra money? By the way, Becky, are you still keeping track of finances and all transactions like we talked about? Yes, I've been able to get the bank to set limits on cash withdrawals, but I can't do anything about writing checks. At least we can track them if he does. I regret that I insisted he hire office help so I could stay home with the children. Becky giggled and continued. Of course, if I hadn't arranged to stay at home, we wouldn't be having as much fun as we are now, would we? I was disappointed just spending a couple of evenings a month with you and a few times on trips. At least staying home means we can have lovemaking more now, thanks to this idea. Dave was sullen and distracted by the river. His friends tried to talk to him and cheer him up, but to no avail. They got him drunk. On Tuesday night, after he fell into a drunken sleep, Don and Roger went out onto the porch to talk quietly. Roger said, I'm starting to worry about Dave. We've been talking to him for 4 days now, and if anything, he's becoming increasingly adamant about leaving Becky and getting revenge on her lover. He's almost ready to explode. How are we going to control this now? It all sounded so good and simple when we planned to control him and get her to come to us more often. What if he finds out and tells our wives? Don said, Oh, calm down, Roger. I can handle it in the divorce and make her look like a saint. In the worst case, she actually divorces him. So what? The only reason we tried this is because she wanted to keep the little fool. I enjoy having lovemaking with her while she's married, but it would be almost as fun if she wasn't. We just have to make sure he and our wives don't find out so we don't get caught. We might have to use a little physical force, but that can wait until we see what happens in a week or two. Dave couldn't clearly hear what the guys were saying, but he woke up and heard them talking on the porch. He knew they were upset that he had been so stubborn about accepting Becky's infidelity, and they thought they would have to convince him to be more tolerant of it. Now he was angry, not only at her, but also at them. Before falling asleep again, he decided he could handle this without his friend's help. Over the next few days, Dave became increasingly distant from his friends. Roger and Kenny started to get really worried when all he said about the situation was, I'm going to find out who this cow is cheating on me with, and they're going to pay big. Finally, the day came when they had to return home. Roger rode with Dave again. There was no talking in the truck. Kenny drove his car, and once they got to an area with good cell service, he called Don. Don and Becky sat in Dave's living room and listened to Kenny report on Dave. He's seething with anger. If anything, he's angrier and more determined to make us pay than he was when I got to the cabin. I don't know what to do, but I suggest we cool it until he calms down. If he catches us, it could lead to trouble. Becky sat there in shock. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she was almost choking. Don sat with his jaw clenched, his face red with anger. After they talked to Kenny for another minute or two, he hung up, and Don turned to Becky. He pulled her towards him and began to calm her down. Becky, you don't need to worry. I didn't want to play hard unless I had to, but it's starting to feel like we have no choice. See how it turns out this weekend and let me know on Sunday night. If it looks like he's going to cause trouble, we'll file a report on Monday. I can freeze all your personal accounts, and I think I can freeze business accounts with court approval of all expenses. We can convince the judge that he could fleece you and destroy the business if we don't get control of it. Dave walked into his house late Friday night and saw Becky sitting in the living room. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying. She looked relaxed, like after a long time of lovemaking. She was wearing one of his shirts and nothing else. Passing through the room, he saw the remains of lovemaking on her body. He felt himself trembling with anger. She looked at him as if she wanted him to see and comment. Dave glared at Becky and walked past her without saying anything. She followed him into their bedroom, and when he got into the shower, she tried to come in with him. He pushed her out and said, "Get your used back out of here. I was hoping to go home and sort this out, but after seeing you tonight, I knew that was impossible. You may destroy me, but I guarantee you that I will eventually get my revenge on you and your lover or lovers." After he cleaned up, Dave quickly gathered up all of his belongings that he could stuff into his truck. He heard Becky talking on the phone as he went in and out of the house. One of the last things he did was try to use the computer to transfer money from their joint accounts. He discovered that he was locked out because the password had been changed. His jaw clenched in anger. He turned to see Becky watching him. Becky seemed sorry when she said, "I was hoping you would come to your senses, and it wouldn't come to this. You know you're making a big mistake, don't you? I love you more than any man I've ever known. I do not want to lose you. If you keep this up, you'll lose the business and everything we've worked for. Just so you know, I hired Don as my lawyer. I just talked to him and told him how you behaved. He will contact you." Dave was shocked. He knew Don was her friend too, but damn, he was his friend and had been his lawyer since he started practicing. He couldn't believe Don could do this to him. Dave left the house and drove straight to his office and warehouse complex. He planned to live in his office and conference room for a while. On the way to the complex, he stopped at the gate and spoke with the guard. "I have some problems with my wife. She and her lover threaten me. I need you to call additional security and keep unauthorized persons away from any part of this property." Around 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, Dave was leaving the complex to get breakfast. When he was stopped at the gate, a man approached him and, confirming his identity, said, "You have been served." He handed Dave the envelope and left. When Dave opened it, he saw a restraining order stating that he could not come within 100 meters of his wife, children, or their place of residence. Also included was an order requiring the court to approve any expenses from his personal or business accounts to prevent him from emptying the company in anticipation of the divorce case, which will be filed next Monday. After breakfast, Dave went to his assistant's house. When she opened the door, she said, "Dave, you look terrible. Something happened. I need to talk. I need help, and you are the only person I can trust. Sorry to bother you on the weekend, but I have a problem and I have no idea who I can trust or talk to." She stepped back and held the door open. "Come in, Dave. Would you like some coffee?" Dave followed her into the kitchen where he saw her husband, Thaddeus, sitting at the table. Apparently, he disturbed them during brunch. There were still plates of eggs on the table. "I'm sorry, I think I'd better leave." Thaddeus looked at Dave and said, "You look damn bad, Dave. For God's sake, sit down and talk to us slowly." Dave told them everything that had happened in his life since last Thursday 2 weeks ago. Then he said, "I just don't know what to do now or how to even help myself. My so-called best friends have spent the last 2 weeks trying to convince me to let Becky have an affair. They say that based on what she said, this went on for years and I didn't notice. So why should I rock the boat? So Don, my ex-best friend, is working with Becky as her lawyer and getting me into legal trouble. I can't even spend money on my life without permission from the court, and I won't be able to get it until at least Monday. My best friend has taken on Becky's case as her lawyer, so I'm cut off from the case. I'm not even sure I have enough money for food. All my credit cards were declined when I tried to pay for breakfast." Gertrude leaned back in her chair and said, "Dave, I just can't believe Becky would do this to you." She looked at her husband and said, "If you need somewhere to stay, you can use one of our free rooms." She turned to her husband and asked, "Ted, can't we help him a little with money too?" Her husband simply nodded his head affirmatively. Dave sat at the table, leaning on his elbows, head down. He had never felt so angry, so helpless, and so determined to make someone pay. Tad thought for a moment, then said, "If what you say is true, you need powerful help. I just hope you don't have a bug somewhere in your clothes." His eyes narrowed and he continued, "Come with me, Dave." They went down to the basement floor. They stopped at the bottom of the stairs and Tad said, "Dave, take off your clothes right now and give them to me. There's a shower over there and I'll bring you some of my things. I'll take this to the front door. After you clean up, we'll talk. I don't think our house is bugged, but they could be watching you here and have a listening device that will pick up conversations outside." Dave changed into Tad's old sweatpants. Then the three of them went to the cement rain shelter under the stairs. He felt stupid when he started talking, and Ted and Gertrude stopped him. They spent the next hour taking notes and planning what needed to be done. After they had planned for every contingency they could think of, Tad left to begin contacting people he thought could help Dave. It was decided that Dave would have minimal contact with these people and that Ted and Gertrude would lend him the money he needed to begin the investigation. Becky was supposed to stop her activities, but they were going to watch her and Dave's three friends for a while. Sunday found Dave, Ted, and Gertrude having lunch together, while Becky, Don, Kenny, and Roger had a meeting at her house. After they had finally exhausted each other carnally, they all sat down and recuperated. Roger said, "I'm worried about all this. I'm really not sure we should be here today at all. What if Dave comes and catches us? I think we should cool it for a while until we get it under control. Why the hell were you even trying to do this to him? Damn, we've been planning this for 3+ years, and you all had to work hard to get him to accept the fact that he's a betrayed, so we could see more of Becky. I'm afraid this will all blow up in our face. I really don't like the fact that yesterday he spent so much time with his secretary and her husband, and our guy didn't hear a sound from the house. Then Thaddeus left, and they stayed to watch Dave instead of following him. What if he did something for Dave? Oh, stop whining. We have Dave tied hand and foot. He can't get enough money to do anything, and we have a lot of surveillance on him. We'll know if he farts before he even does it. He's sitting with his secretary and her husband right now, crying into his coffee. If he leaves, we'll get a call before he gets to the end of the block. He can't call from her phone or his cell without us knowing what he's saying." They started playing carnally again. None of them saw the man pointing the camera and microphone through the window in their direction. On Monday morning, Dave began trying to find a lawyer to represent him. He spoke to several and made an appointment with 2. He was at a loss because Don had been doing his legal work for years, and now he was representing Becky, so he had to find someone else. He eventually decided to hire Sally Hawk. She made a great impression during the interview and was also highly recommended. The first thing they did was start proceedings to unfreeze his business accounts and give him enough money to live on. They also decided to hire another private firm to spy on Becky. He allowed wiretapping of his house and video surveillance. He allowed Sally to begin divorce proceedings on charges of infidelity. Later that evening, Tad gave Dave the film he had shot the day before. Naturally, Dave was heartbroken. He got even angrier because Becky was involved with all 3 of his friends. At least now he knew who his opponents were. The next morning, he went to his office and made 5 copies of the CD. He sent one to each of his friends' wives, his lawyer, and kept one for himself, plus put the original in a safe deposit box. He also posted the videos on several amateur adult sites on the internet, using the real names of all participants. He set up the site as a pay-per-view, and money was transferred from an account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. He smirked because apparently Don had forgotten that he had given him the key to his office, and Dave had set up the site from there so that when he was tracked down, good old Don would take the blame. Several of Becky's friends and family members received photos of her in action via email. This was all done from the free computers in the college library, so he couldn't be blamed for it. He thought about using Don's office for that too, but then realized that Don would never do something like that, so it would look suspicious. Using the college computers was really easy. He had done this many times in the past and had never been caught. They were supposed to be for students only, and you had to use your student ID and password to log in. Almost every time he walked into the library or one of the computer labs, he found a computer that had been left on. He was using someone else's login, and even if the usage was traced back to the college, it was traced back to that student, not him. The local college didn't use security cameras, so he didn't even have to worry about being photographed in the area. Dave had a lot of fun on Wednesday answering phone calls from people who had seen the video. Later that evening, Becky called him in tears. She said, "How could you do this? I thought you loved me. I told you it would only be lovemaking because you couldn't give me what I needed. How could you ruin my life like that?" Dave laughed and said, "Rebecca, I didn't ruin your life. You did. I'm simply carrying out the retribution I promised you if you actually went through with your plans. Of course, I'm sure you've been cheating on me for a while. Now that I think about it, there were many times when one of the guys was convinced I wasn't at home and came back late. Over the past few years, I've seen too many things that didn't add up then but make sense now. By the time I'm done with you and these idiots, you'll regret the day you did this." Later that day, Dave received a call from his sister Becky. She said, "Poor stupid prick. I see you finally found out about your ideal wife. I'm guessing you sent that damn video. Now I think she and I can share the boys. I didn't know she was doing them until I got this." He felt a shiver when she hung up. For the rest of the night, he heard her maniacal laughter. Don also called, and as soon as Dave answered, he started yelling at him. When Dave heard who it was, he led him on. He managed to get him to talk for almost 15 minutes. Don threatened both physical and legal damage. The best part of his expletive-filled tirade was, "You're a freaking idiot. By the time I'm done with you, you'll regret messing with me. I'm going to have your strumpet wife anytime I want, and we'll have most of your money too. If you had just done what I told you, you would still have a family, money, and a life. Now, after I break you, I'll make the boys freak you. I've been having lovemaking with this little strumpet since high school, And I'll be having lovemaking with her long after your history, you son of a cow. I hope you like living in the ghetto because that's where you'll end up. When I'm done with you, I'm going to sue everything I can find and blow your money just by defending myself against it." Subsequent calls from Becky's parents were sad. Her mother cried when she asked Dave, "How could you do this to Becky? I know it looks like she hurt you terribly, but spreading pictures of her everywhere was too vindictive. Couldn't you have handled this in a more civilized way?" By the time he decided to go home for the evening, Dave was satisfied with his actions for the day. He was almost certain that the computerized answering system installed by his company would pay for itself based on what it recorded that day alone. When he bought it, he was worried that his then lawyer and friend, Don, had advised him to contact his carrier for a setup. As soon as the phone rang, the computer answered it and issued an alert. As the recorders began to work, an alert was sent to all subscribers before their call could be forwarded. It said, "Thank you for calling us. Central Inventory Logistics and Security. All phone calls are recorded for later use. If you do not want your call to be recorded, please hang up now. If you do not hang up and know your extension number, enter it after the beep. If you don't know the extension you need, press 0 and an operator will help you." It turned out that the good lawyer didn't think about the warning or was so angry that he ignored it because all his threats and boasts were recorded. After the warning, which he insisted the telecom operator enter into the system, Dave thought this would be epic justice. Unfortunately, everyone in Becky's little group stopped seeing her after the cases were filed. It was lucky that Ted's friend got the video and audio clips that first Saturday, because none of the private investigators caught anything incriminating on video. They did receive a few incriminating phone calls, but most of them were so ambiguous that they were almost useless. One of the first things Sally did was send information about Don to the state bar. His license to practice law was immediately suspended, and then pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings and litigation, he was disbarred for life due to his threats and unethical behavior. Dave's divorce was granted, and Becky came out of it very poorly. Ultimately, she received approximately 25% of the family property. Dave retained control of his company. Dave was awarded custody of the children largely because of a small photo that was not immediately noticed. That day, while Ted's friend was taking pictures of Becky and the guys in the living room, he accidentally photographed another observer. His perspective captured not only the orgy, but also how Dave's house was built. He photographed the living room and dining room to show a little face in the backyard. Peering into the house, Dave's 8-year-old daughter watched her mother have lovemaking with the crowd through the patio door. When the judge saw this photo, he awarded Dave full custody of the children. Dave's lawsuits against Don were also ultimately very successful. He won $1.3 million odd earned damages for violating attorney-client privilege and for taking on Becky as a client when he acted as Dave's lawyer. Of course, he was also censured for having a physical relationship with his client and many other ethical violations that also resulted in fines being paid to the state. By the time Dave dealt with Don, he was nearly bankrupt. His wife, Shelley, managed to almost completely clean out the remaining family assets during the divorce. Kenny and Pam divorced, and she also received most of his assets. To everyone's surprise, Roger and Trixie did not divorce. It seems that she had previously succumbed to the seduction of 3 friends and was a willing participant in their debauchery. Unfortunately, Roger no longer liked his friends using Trixie for their pleasure. It seems that when they were kicked out of the house, Don and Kenny moved in with Roger. Many nights they monopolized Trixie, and Roger didn't get the lovemaking he felt he deserved. One evening, he attacked Don and Kenny. They strike him so badly that he ended up in the hospital. Charges were brought, and Don and Kenny were convicted and sent to prison for a year. This time, Roger and Trixie divorced. Dave sat in his office almost a year after his affairs had been settled. He and Gertrude were discussing the latest article about Don, Kenny, and Roger fighting over Trixie. She asked Dave, "Have you ever talked to Rebecca? I know she can visit the children under court supervision." Dave looked at her and said, "No, we only talk when it's necessary, and when it's only a necessary conversation about the kids. I have no desire to talk to her, and if I could get out of this, I would never see or hear from her again." "I'm just curious. I mean, for years I thought you were the perfect match, and then, well, I just always wondered if you found out why she did it. I just can't understand why a woman who loves her husband would do what she did." Dave sat for a moment, looking at Gertrude. He felt his stomach tighten, then he clenched his jaw and bit his upper lip. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a folder. He passed it across the table to Gertrude and said, I don't know why I kept this letter. I don't even know why I agreed to read it. Do you remember about 7 months ago when Becky's mother came into the office crying? She handed me this letter and insisted that I read it before she left, which I did. Gertrude opened the folder and read the following. My dear David, I know you think that I no longer have the right to call you my dearest, but you are still the only man I love. I know that I have lost you forever, but I need to open my soul to you. I know I caused you irreparable pain, but that was never my intention. I didn't mean to hurt you at all. I never intended to cheat on you either, but I did. I know you knew that I made love to all 3 of our friends when we were dating in high school. I know that you also made love to all 3 girls. It never bothered any of us. The first time I cheated on you was similar. You had to work on a major theft of inventory the weekend Don and Shelley were throwing a Valentine's Day party on our 9th anniversary. I was so lonely, and I drank too much. I know it's not an excuse, but I did it. Shelley made Don drive me home in our car. Kenny followed to take Don home while the other helped clean up Don and Shelley's house after. On the way home, Don kept reminding me of the time he and Kenny both made love to me at the same time. I got very excited. He and Kenny took me inside and insisted on undressing me and putting me to bed like they said. While they were doing this, Don reminded Kenny of that night. Another night when you had to work and left me alone on Valentine's Day. They started kissing me and arousing me. I knew it was wrong, and at first I tried to get them to stop. They didn't want to, or rather, they stopped. Then the other one started kissing and rubbing me. I felt so hot listening to their conversation and remembering how good it was to be with 2 men. Finally, they pushed me back onto the bed. We had lovemaking for almost an hour that night. I have to admit I liked it. I had more climaxes than I ever had with you. I knew it was because there were 2 of them, and they never let me relax. But they were still very good. A couple of days later, Don and Roger came over. When they heard you were out of town on other work, I tried not to let them in, but they begged, and I finally let them in. I knew it was wrong, but it felt so good. We spent the evening in bed again. Since then, at least once a month, I had 1, 2, and sometimes all 3 if they managed to escape, and you were unlikely to catch us. I know you noticed that on the weekends and holidays that we all spent together, some of the boys and I disappeared for a long time. We were somewhere and had lovemaking. I don't know how many times. We almost got caught. God, the fear of getting caught. Almost getting caught was so scary for all of us. We started talking and wishing that we didn't have to rush and worry about getting caught. Don finally came up with the idea I gave you about letting me cheat. He told me what could happen if you divorced me. I was sure that you loved me enough to let me cheat. And I was also sure that you would never risk losing your children or your livelihood. So I agreed to his plan. I am very, very sorry, my love, that I did this to you, to our family. But I was weak. I became so dependent to the amazing lovemaking that these 3 men could give me. Please, my dear, forgive me for being so weak. Yours forever, Becky. After reading the letter, Gertrude raised her head. Her eyes watered, but she clenched her jaw angrily. Dave, I really think she loves you more than anything in the world. I know she's hurting. But Dave, she was almost as much a sufferer as you. I think your good friend Don was a carnivore. You know, we've both heard some really nasty rumors about him over the years. I wouldn't be surprised if he purposely got her drunk that first night. I don't know a single person of high moral character. Not a single true friend who would take advantage of her, as she said. Yes, I know, Gertie, but... Well, I'm not sure she told me the true story. She always seemed more attentive to Don than I would have liked. I always laughed it off. But a few times we fought after a party because I thought she was too friendly and took too many liberties with him. But I never called her or him out on anything. That would cause a big fight. I have to admit that after Don's phone call when I finally caught them, thanks to you and Ted, I had enough doubts to do a DNA test on the kids. You can't even imagine how relieved I was when the test results showed that I was their father. Well, anyway, I believe she thinks she loves me, but I don't think it's real love. It was more of a hobby. Perhaps a deep sympathy. It was easy to live with me. I was a good provider and father. Now I think I was the last choice, and we got married because, well, I don't know why she married me. I loved her to end of life, but I don't think she felt such deep love for me. I think that's why she cheated, and why she continued to do it. I think she was a selfish person and only thought about her pleasure, her needs and desires. I'm unaccustomed to it. Now if only I could find a good replacement.